Hello, everyone. I am so privileged this evening for me and morning for Peter to have Peter Crutchley from New Zealand. How are you today, Peter?
I am doing very well, and it's great to be on board. And thank you very much for having me, Cari. Really great opportunity.
The honor is all mine. Tell us, Peter, where are you from? You're not originally from New Zealand. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, I'm originally South African, and I would describe myself as a white African. Mm-hmm. We were third generation South Africans. We had no links, we had no relatives left in the UK, although that's originally where my roots come from.
Yeah.
But no lasting links there, or no real links. And so essentially South African, a white African. Mm-hmm. And I never ever thought I'd have to leave South Africa, or that I would even consider leaving South Africa.
Right.
Warm and wonderful people. You've interviewed a couple of them, Al and Sheldon, or the two of them that I remember. And yeah, what a wonderful country. And some of what I'll be commenting on, and the importance for the West and the importance for the United States, I'll try to bring out.
Okay.
I understand most of your audience will probably be from the US. Mm-hmm. And yes, I'll try and link it back as much as I can to the US and the relevance thereof.
I'm just fascinated in people from everywhere. So whatever is interesting to you is interesting to me. So tell me, Peter, what's on your mind? You're very active in the comment section on YouTube. You're active on Twitter. We see you around, but you have something specifically you want to say today. So what is it?
I do, and it'll develop as we go along. Okay. But essentially, I think one thing I need to clear up from the word go is that I'm on the Trump train fair and square, in spite of all the negative publicity and the mainstream media, which, by the way, in New Zealand is just as negative as it is in the United States. Very, very similar, which is probably no surprise to you.
No, but it's still disappointing.
It is, but that's all part of the package. And as I think Bill Mitchell says, when you're over the target, you're getting the flak.
Yes.
And that's what's going on. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm firmly on the Trump train. Nobody's perfect, and what I wanted to kick off with, because it's essentially what has driven my life, and that is the topic of leadership, the right leadership and the wrong leadership style.
Right.
And as I say, it's been an interest of mine for many, many years. And it links back to Donald Trump, because I wasn't on board from the word go.
Okay.
Not at all. Mm-hmm. I think that makes it interesting as well. And I'll explain why. So when I was at South African Airways, I spent 23 years there. And I'm an engineer, by the way. That's my background.
Okay.
I'm a bit of an anomaly, because I probably studied the wrong thing. I'm actually a people person.
Yeah.
And all those things in the mathematics and scientific field, I could do them, but it didn't really come that naturally. Mm-hmm. What did come naturally, or more naturally to me, is the people side of things. So even though I joined South African Airways, I was on the engineering side and flight operations, and it was very technical, but I took an interest in the people side, because it seemed to me that the biggest problems we were facing in the organization had to do with people and not technical issues. So that's why I got fired up on that one. We had a wonderful lady who was in charge of the training section, the management training section. Her name was Susan Volmerons, a South African, obviously. And we had an affinity, and I took a real interest in the development side, on the people side. And she used to use me as a guinea pig for management courses. So she knew I had an interest. So she would say, hey, I've heard about this new program. And she kept her eyes wide open. She was a very visionary person. She kept her eye open for what was new on the leadership front. And then I'd end up going on quite a few of those programs. And so I was exposed to a wide range of people and topics. It was a brilliant opportunity. And then based on that recommendation, she would either, and she'd obviously weigh up things, and we'd decide, do you go ahead or not with this program. But anyway, while all this was going on, it became clear to me that there were really only two options on the leadership front. The one is a typical top-down, autocratic, bureaucratic, generally run by narcissistic people and it's what I would traditionally call as management. I've got better words for this later on, but I won't confuse the issue now. So essentially, you've got the top-down pyramid approach.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is the inverted pyramid. And the inverted pyramid is really about the care and growth of other people.
Mm.
So those are the options. It's care and growth of other people, with the leader at the bottom supporting and encouraging those people, and genuinely putting the customer first, because they should be at the top, not at the bottom. So everything falls into place when you invert the pyramid. So getting back to your imagery that you've talked about on your videos, that's one of the pictures I think people need to have clearly in their minds, is that we've got to invert the pyramid. And this links to an interesting statement or comment, really, and that is that what we need is not revolutions, but half revolutions. I've never heard anybody talk about this. A revolution is a 360-degree rotation. So all that happens is the pyramid does a 360-degree circle and ends up back on its feet, fairly and squarely, with another bunch of narcissists in control to continue to destroy whatever it is they're destroying. But nothing actually changes except the faces.
It's
right?
true.
So that to me sums up a revolution. A half revolution swings the pyramid upside down through 180 degrees. You now have the leaders, the true leaders, who are at the bottom supporting and encouraging the people that they care about and want to grow. So it's all about unleashing potential and creating a better future that way. So I was going through all of this and learning about these things. And next thing, to get back to the United States and Donald Trump, up comes The Apprentice. I can't remember when it was, but I watched only one or two, and I thought, no, I don't like this guy's attitude. From what I can see, he's a bully. I don't know that he really cares about the people. So I didn't watch very much of it, but just the very short exposure I had, I thought, Donald Trump, I don't like you, and I don't like your attitude. It doesn't link with this inverted pyramid story that I see. And I never gave Donald Trump another thought until 30 years later or 25 years later, when I heard he was running for president. So, of course, in the last 25 years, I've continued to think a lot about civilization and the threat that it's under, the link that it has to the lack of leadership, the lack of genuine leadership. So Brexit occurred, which I was very, very excited about. Nigel Farage, I've got the utmost respect for. And then along comes Donald Trump running against Hillary Clinton. Well, with my interest in world affairs, I took an active interest and started listening to Bill Mitchell, Your Voice Radio, which is now, I understand, Your Voice America. Of course, that's where I came across yourself and have been an avid follower ever since. And it was wonderful then to follow the entire election and observe what happened. Now, as I say, initially, I had a very negative perception of what Trump was all about. But then I started to listen to what he was saying. And I didn't miss any of his speeches, I don't think.
I don't think I've written this very many either.
No, even though it was repetitive. And this is where I believe the real Donald Trump is coming through. Somebody who can stand up and talk the way he did. I don't believe that's an act.
No.
So getting back to The Apprentice, I think that was the act. Right? It was a show. And real life is not about a show. And managing or leading an organization or a country is not about a show. That's where the rubber hits the road. So it became evident to me that, hang on, my initial impressions were probably incorrect. And so that's why I'm on the Trump train, and that's the story or the process I've gone through. And I believe he's real. I believe that he's the real deal and is giving his best shot under extremely difficult circumstances. So I think it helps to get a feel for where each of us is coming from, just discussing this, because he is a highly divisive figure. and is highly unpopular where I am here in New Zealand. Popular. And from the media anyway, I don't know about the average person in the street. I'm kind of heads down. We're involved with the business.
Right.
It's flat out. I don't have much contact, to put it honestly, with too many people.
Yeah.
There isn't time. So I can't speak on behalf of New Zealanders. I'm not trying to do that. All I'm saying is there's a negative perception from the media, but I'm totally on board. I'm all for it. And you'll see this topic of leadership will come through a little bit more as we go through this discussion.
Mm-hmm. Well, I will say this. I love your image of the pyramids and the top down versus the bottom up and the half revolution. That's going to stick in my mind for a long time. So well laid out, so well said. I've tried to say similar things. You said it so much better and so succinctly. That is an absolutely brilliant way to phrase all of that. And I find it interesting that your initial image of Donald Trump came from The Apprentice, and it was negative. My initial impression from him, I think most vividly for me, also came from The Apprentice, and it was absolute the opposite of yours. Right.
And I've heard you say that, and that's why in some ways I was questioning what I was going to say. You know?
Well, no, it's okay, because if you hadn't watched an entire season, if you only watched an episode or two, then you would maybe get that impression from Donald Trump. The boardroom scene where he's firing somebody and sending them down the elevator and into a cab and down Fifth Avenue. But if you watched a season and you watched the kinds of people he brought in, the kinds of people he even brought onto the set, into the show as contestants. These people were as diverse as they could possibly be. We saw a little bit of everything. But once they got into that boardroom, there was only one way they were all critiqued, and that was by their performance alone. He's a results guy. So it was all about the results. How did your team perform? Who was the weak link? Who was the strong person? And it was a lot of people skills. And a lot of the ways those contestants interacted with each other. And I always find that fascinating. I'm a bit like you, Peter. I'm a kindred spirit in that I love to study people. I love to try to understand how they interact with one another, what motivates somebody, what demotivates somebody, and to watch these teams with a project manager try to accomplish a task, I thought was fascinating. And then, of course, one figure, I believe she was from season 1, maybe from season 2, was Omarosa. And she was on the campaign trail as well. But I just remember her. She was one of those standout contestants as somebody you would think of as a very difficult person. And I saw she should have been fired, in my opinion, multiple times. Trump saw something in her.
Yeah.
And kept her around and kept her around. And we were like, when's he going to fire her? When's he going to fire her? And he finally did. But after that season, after that show, he kept in contact with this young woman. I don't know exactly if she works for the organization, but when I saw her during the campaign in the lobby of Trump Tower, I was like, oh, there's Omarosa. Oh, my stars. So somebody that could be fired in a public way on a public set and still remain friends with the guy who sent her down the elevator into a cabin down Fifth Avenue. I'm thinking, who can do that? Not very many people can do that, can bridge that gap. And he did the same thing with Ben Carson. Right before the Iowa caucus, he let loose on Ben Carson.
I know,
big time. And yet Ben Carson was the first of the 17 to endorse Donald Trump, and now he's on his cabinet.
Absolutely brilliant.
Do you do that?
Absolutely brilliant.
He defeats you, and then he holds his hand out to shake your hand. And if you'll come back on board, you'll be the best. He'll be your best friend. So he's a fascinating person with a fascinating set of skills. I just wanted to let you know I had a very, very different impression of The Apprentice. And looking back, once he started to campaign, looking back and hearing that people like Diamond and Silk were
Yeah.
familiar with Trump from The Apprentice, I thought, I wonder if that whole show was almost an audition for President of the United States.
That could be. Well, thank you so much for your briefing on that as well. You're correct. I didn't watch. I guess I just came in at a bad moment, and I didn't
No,
watch.
it's okay, because your
I judged too
perception is
quickly.
right, but your perception is your perception. Somehow or another, you went from a bad impression or a negative
Absolutely.
impression and to a good one, and so you made that journey. How exactly did that happen?
Oh, purely just by listening to what he was saying.
Okay.
Just by realizing that this man was speaking on a repetitive basis, saying exactly the same thing, and I couldn't disagree with just about anything he was saying.
Yeah.
So I thought, this guy's for real.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was actually very rapid. And then I was on board and have been ever since, and continue to be. And he needs our thoughts, and he needs our support and
Yes.
prayers.
Yes.
There's
I
no
think so,
doubt
too.
about it. There are severe threats in terms of the forces that are rallied against not only him, but civilization as a whole.
Yes.
And that's what we probably will get into a little bit more as we go through. So, yeah, what a wonderful opportunity to have people like Nigel Farage and Donald Trump and the others out there as well. And he has helped to give these people a voice, no doubt.
Yes.
Because, yeah, people were too scared to say what they were saying, what they really felt.
Okay, so now you're on the Trump train. So
Absolutely. And we'll get back to the train analogy, which actually predates the Trump train story. But I'll explain a little bit of that later on. Now, what I wanted to touch on now, just to get back to South Africa and leaving South Africa and the relevance to, again, the United States and to any country who's considering doing what they're doing at the moment. So, okay, I had this interest in the leadership stuff, and we'd actually formed a group within South African Airways called the Concerned Employees, because what we were trying to do was work with management to bring about a more service-oriented culture, because the organization was very much top-down. It was very much a semi-government organization. It was the national carrier. So the management was accountable to the Minister of Transport.
okay.
And that's the way it was set up. So we as a group were interacting with management, and I was going on the courses that they expected me to go on. And
Yeah.
we were merely reflecting this back and trying to move forward on that basis. So I had an opportunity to not work with, but interact with on a regular basis the chief executive of the old guard, and then the new guard when the transition took place after Nelson Mandela came to power. So we left South Africa in 98. Nelson Mandela was released in 1990, and he became president in 1994, early 94.
Right.
Now, particularly from 94 to 98, he I think was president until 99, but we'd left by then. But during the 94-98 period, there was a period of massive change within the organization. And a lot of it had to do with a culture shift. And as we were involved already on the culture of the organization from a leadership perspective, excuse me, I had an opportunity of carrying these ideas through to the new management, who were in the same building on the opposite wing, right? It was quite a strange and amazing setup. And it was an interesting experience, because here was Nelson Mandela having been appointed on the basis of democracy and openness and Rainbow Nation and, let's move forward together and so on. Which I bought into totally. I was fully supportive of that.
Yeah.
And I thought that's the way things could be moved in the organization as well. And that we could continue to invert the pyramid, because the process had started with the management,
Right.
the European management. Some wonderful, wonderful people that were leaders at that time, hence the leadership programs that they were promoting. So what became very clear to me over the next 2 or 3 years is that it was going to be a top-down system all over again. There was no way that it was going to be the other way. In other words, top-down, control, narcissistic, and that's the way it's going to be. And if you don't like it, you know where to go.
Yeah.
And we had to go. I knew that I was pretty outspoken in that area. I'm actually a very quiet person, right? But when it comes to values, then I do start to become fairly vocal. And that's what happened in that situation too. And I realized there was absolutely no way I could continue there. No way. And that was one of the things that led to the decision to go. I just could not see a long-term future. We had 2 young children, and I couldn't see that things were going to be heading in the right direction. But the other thing which I wanted to mention, and to me this was a real significant error on behalf of Mandela, and that was to open the borders. You've heard of the open border story.
Yes.
And this is the relevance to America and to Europe and any country who plans to do this sort of thing.
Right.
Now, the interesting thing, I did a little bit of research. The South African border is around about 3,200 kilometers long, which is much the same as the Mexican border. They're virtually the same. During pre-Mandela years, when there was a border war going on and so on, that border was pretty much secure.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And it didn't need a wall all the way along. Some of it was river, some of it was fence, some of it was pretty rugged terrain with fence and so on. It was all patrolled.
Okay.
A lot of it was desert, some desert areas, and so that made it a lot easier.
Yeah.
But there were some very difficult areas too. And by the way, all of us at that stage went through military training, military service. We all had to do that. So yeah, we all got involved, and therefore we were very aware of the border and what was going on. All I'm really trying to say is that border was pretty much secure. So for America, yes, you can secure the border. There's no doubt about it. It can be done. And if a handful of people could do it in South Africa, you can do it very easily in the States. It's not a difficult task at all. It has its challenges, but it's by no means too difficult. Anyway, so Mandela gets elected, and as I say, I got the feel through my experience at South African Airways that, and this was, as I say, government influenced, the people, appointees. So I got a feel, an inside feel of how things were and how they were going to be. And that, coupled with the fact that the borders were now open, created a pretty big problem.
So Mandela wanted them open?
Well,
or did
I
it
don't know
just...
if he wanted to open them, but he was the man in control, and he and subsequent presidents have just opened the floodgates. There is no border control, from what I can see. Yeah, sure, at the road there is a border control point.
Right.
But you can walk over various points wherever you like, whenever you like. And it's estimated, of course, nobody has any idea how many migrants there are in South Africa illegally. One estimate is around 10 million.
Oh,
but
that's a lot.
Who knows? Who knows?
Right.
I mean, a whole lot of people from Zimbabwe, I think estimates are about 2 or 3 million from Zimbabwe might be in South Africa. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. But anyway, the total population of South Africa officially is around 50 million. But now you've got around 10 million who are there legally. And they've come in from all over Africa. Because as the failed states of Africa continue to fail, so you end up with an even bigger disaster in places like South Africa. So it's completely overrun. And I often ask myself, even with the best will in the world, I don't know how you go about sorting that out. It's a very, very difficult situation.
Yeah, it is.
Because one of the points that I really wanted to bring out from my experience with South Africa is that it only takes very, very small percentage to wreck things for everybody. So take the immigrant, migrant thing out of the picture for a moment. The point I really wanted to make is that I reckon 95, 98%, let's say, of the entire South African population, of any race, any creed, any color, are wonderful, warm, loving people who want to get on with their lives, who just want to put in an honest day's work and get on with it. Great, great, warm people. You don't find too many of them like that around in the world. They're great. And it only takes a very small percentage of people in power or who affect the people in power to ruin it for everybody. And therein lies the tragedy of what's going on there. I reckon it's no more than 2% who actively want to kill or maim or injure, murder farmers, do whatever. It's a very small percentage. But that percentage, if they are not stopped in their tracks by the people in power, so they aided, bettered in some way by the people in power, there is just no way that you can, it becomes unlivable.
Right.
You've heard all the stories, and I won't bore you with them now. In terms of, we had a house in a place called Edenvale, not far from the airport. We had a security gate on our front door, which we could see from the road. So as we drove in, we'd have a security gate, a big electric gate at the front, walls all the way around, of course, and we would have 2 German shepherds inside. Then if we saw them moving when we drove past the house, so we could see the dogs were okay, they hadn't been poisoned, so we knew there was nobody in the house. Then I'd push a button, release the gate, the dogs would come running out, and then we knew there was nobody on the other side of the wall, because we still hadn't opened the electric gate. Then only would we open the electric gate, because now we knew there was nobody there. And that was the procedure whenever we went home. And that was 20 years ago. Now people might say, oh yeah, nothing ever happened to you, and nothing ever did happen to us. So people might say, oh, we were just neurotic and crazy. But nevertheless, that's what we did. Both our neighbors were robbed. You had to stay one jump ahead of your neighbor, or you next in line. So now that's why. Anyway, so you've heard all those stories. I don't want to depress people with that.
No,
and
it's fascinating.
that's reality, and that's what happens to. By the way, when I grew up, we had civilization. It was peaceful. It was there was law and order. To me, what defines civilization, one of the defining issues for civilization, is that a woman on her own should be able to walk around any time of day or night, anywhere she chooses, and not be molested or murdered or worse.
Right.
And the same with a child. A child may be lost. It happens, they disappear in the supermarket. We used to have a fit when that happened, once we had children. But as children ourselves, 50 years ago, no problem at all. We used to wander around, nobody felt threatened. So it can be.
Yes, it can be.
And we've lost that in the Western world, seems to have lost that in a very short space of time.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the other message I wanted to bring across, is that I never thought this could happen to me or our family, that we'd have to leave all our friends, all our family, sell up everything and move to another country where we didn't know anybody. I didn't have a job, struggled to find a job. It's been a real struggle for us. Things didn't all work out well, not at all. And it's put huge pressure on all concerned. That's another story. But the point I'm trying to make is I never thought this would happen. I never thought we would ever have to leave what we had. But it happened to us. And it can happen in the States, and it can happen wherever else. You need to be careful quoting certain countries, I understand, in Europe. But it can happen in a flash, and it's such an insidious thing, but it can happen, and happen very quickly. And that is why we have to be alert, and that's why we're doing what we're doing here, trying to get the message out to people. Be alert, wake up, realize that this can happen to you, wherever you are. We are under threat. There's no doubt about it. So that I wanted to bring across is my experience with South Africa and the relevance of what happened there to the rest of the Western civilization. Yeah.
Right. Well, I appreciate your definition of civilization. I completely agree. As a child, I used to ride my bicycle to school.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, my parents thought nothing of it. They didn't call the school to check and make sure I got there. No news was good news to my mom. You know, if she didn't hear anything, that means I got there. So, I mean, it was a different time. It was a different world.
Yeah.
You know?
It was.
It really was. And so I recognize some of the things you're saying, and it happened here too. I think it's happened all over. As a college student, I wandered around the European continent with a Eurail pass and my sister.
Absolutely.
We were on the streets of Paris for Bastille Day, you know, back in the mid 80s, you know, late at night, you know, walking around, and we didn't feel threatened or you know, worried. You know, it just didn't occur to us. I was on the tubes of London, heading home after a late show in the West End. You know,
yes,
never thought anything about it. So
absolutely.
So yes, it has changed drastically. Linda Barrett, one of the other women I've interviewed, says that you cannot walk in Paris as a woman by yourself anymore, not even in daytime. So
it is such a tragedy.
Mm-hmm. Not alone. You can't. Not even to shop in some of the well-traveled areas. You can't be by yourself. She says it's too far away from where you have to park. It's not safe. You just need a bodyguard to shop in Paris. Isn't that that's unbelievable? So you're right on the money. You notice things. It's sad, so heartbreaking to hear that it happened in South Africa too, and then it did happen, like you say, in such a short amount of time. So your observations are right on there. What do you think are the solutions? What do you think the...
Okay. Yeah.
We know the problem.
Well, I've listened to a chap named Simon Sinek. I don't know whether you've heard him. He does a wonderful talk on TED Talk, TED.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And it's on leadership. And he says people need to structure things around why things are the way they are, then how we're going to sort things out, and then what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. And he strongly comes across with that order. So we've been talking about the why. We're all getting a good feel and understand that what we're seeing taking place with Western civilization is serious. So we need to do something. That's the why. Mm-hmm. And I think we're all getting that. Then there's the how. Mm-hmm. Now, the how is something that we don't really spend enough time on. And it's something that I've given a bit of thought to. And as I said, these are all just thoughts, and I really will appreciate the criticism of people. Go for it in the comments. Criticize, criticize, criticize. That's how we develop. That's how we grow. That's how we learn. So I'm not scared of criticism. Go for it. Go for it. In fact, that's one of the things I'd like to come out of this is the ideas that we're putting forward here, because there are some concrete suggestions that I'm going to put forward. Mm-hmm. Criticize them, make suggestions. Let's see how we can come up with something better. So anyway, you've asked, what are we going to do about it? I'm going to just start with how.
Okay.
Then the what. Now the how, to figure out the how to address the problem, we need to first of all understand the nature of the enemy. That's the first thing. Mm-hmm. Then we need to learn a little bit from history. So I'm going to keep this really short. But what I did do was read a little bit about David and Goliath, right? Because I think it's a very good example of understanding the enemy, and it gives us a very good idea of what we need to do to overcome the enemy. Mm-hmm. So the enemy is not people, it's the forces of evil that are behind this lot. Mm-hmm. That's what we've got to take out. Yeah. And we'll take out. Mm-hmm. And this is how I think we're going to do it. So first we've got to understand what Goliath is all about. And Goliath, from the descriptions I read, had poor vision. Very poor vision. That was the first thing. Mm-hmm. But two, and the obvious thing, is very big. So has an inability to change direction, or inability to change position. Mm-hmm. That's the way you want to look at it. Mm-hmm. So, and then of course very cruel and so on. But that's the nature of the beast, and that's just the way it is. But the important points I wanted to make were lack of vision and lack of creativity that goes along with that. Only had one tool in the toolbox, and that was a great big sword, right? So lack of creativity, lack of vision, and a big immovable object, which actually makes for a wonderful target. You can't miss.
It's true. It really is true. He did make a great big target, didn't he?
Absolutely. And it simply can't change. So there's no problem with us discussing what we're discussing, because it can all be done in the open. I'm all for openness, by the way. That is what I believe is one of our key values, is openness.
Yeah.
And people can take shots at us any way and anyhow they like. Couldn't care less. That's what openness is all about. So that's the first thing, is to understand the nature of what we're dealing with. And it's essentially evil, and it's dark. So the other thing we need to think about is what we can learn from history. And here I thought was particularly important, and something that you would probably relate to. If you're looking at freedom, civilization is essentially about freedom, freedom of movement, freedom of expression, and so on.
Right.
The opposite of freedom is slavery. Slavery to being, the worst is when you are put in jail and you have no freedom whatsoever, or people threatening you, and there's fear and there's uncertainty and so on. So I thought, okay, if slavery is the opposite, then what can we learn about the fight to free us from slavery that took place in the past? So I got a book out or read a book about William Wilberforce.
Oh, I love that you brought him up. He's my hero. Oh,
well,
Peter.
He's my hero too, and I'm going to add another one. Just so that people can't say I'm a misogynist. Her name is Hannah More.
Okay.
Have you heard of Hannah More?
I am not familiar with Hannah More. I'm anxious to know about her. If she's in the same category as your mind is William Wilberforce, then I'm all about learning about Hannah More.
Hannah More is a wonderful, wonderful woman. And her book is called Fierce Convictions, and I forget the rest of it, but it's Hannah More, and of course I can send all this info through to you.
Yeah.
But I read her book as well. And what I found out was that Hannah More and William Wilberforce worked closely together over decades, together with the Clapham sect. Strange name. It sounds like a cult, but that's not suggesting cults are a good idea. It just happened to be the terminology they used. But the key drivers were William Wilberforce and Hannah More. And both of them had this vision of getting rid of slavery. And they were against cruelty. And I must mind, just as a bit of a sideline, but I think it's a very important one too. They, and William Wilberforce in particular, started the Animal Welfare League, which led to the Society Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, which is now, as you know, a worldwide thing. I hate cruelty to animals. I hate that. Because it's also about, people who are cruel to animals are going to be cruel to people.
Yeah.
So, I'm not saying that, I'm not crazy. I'm not being stupid about you mustn't kill any animal to eat. That's not where I eat meat and so on.
Right.
But what I'm saying is cruelty, that's another marker for civilization, is the level of cruelty. And isn't it interesting that Hannah More and William Wilberforce were involved with that organization too? That's just one of the things they did. But it's not what they're known for. It should be as well.
Yeah.
It links to civilized behavior. Yeah. So that was one of the things. Now, this was the other point that I wanted to make about what they did. Sorry, two things. First thing, they met regularly. They networked like crazy. William Wilberforce, without the internet, did thousands of kilometers every month for 20 or 30 years in his carriage and horses. Thousands and thousands of kilometers to network. We don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Networking. Absolutely vital. Not everybody, because that's not going to achieve anything either. But a core group of people need to network, driven by the same vision and the same values. It's all about being vision, values driven, which is the essence of good leadership, right?
Right.
So that was one of the things that they did, which I thought obviously we can learn from, and you know that, and that's kind of a no-brainer. We need to do that. The other one, which is not very obvious at all, they had a one-page document, and I happen to have it here. It's a plan view of a drawing of a slave ship. I don't know whether you've heard of it. It was called the Brooks Slave Ship, and it's widely available on the internet, but I'll just show it up for the audience so that people can see what it is. I'll try and do this. That's what it looked like. This is the actual picture. So it's a plan view showing how the slaves were packed into a ship. Now, bearing in mind that printing and so on was not the way it is now, this was 1788, they printed hundreds of thousands of that very document, one page, and they distributed it all over the UK and throughout Europe as well, not just through the UK. From the books, they made the point that that picture gets back to what you said too, Cari, about imagery. That slave ship picture, they reckon, is with all the networking. No, it's no single thing did it, but that, they said, carried most weight in terms of transforming people's view, the average person, because until then they could just ignore it. They were just fed the stories by the local news media of the time, because all they saw was the ships departing. The ships were departing the UK with goods. They were arriving with goods from America, right? They didn't see them departing with slaves and arriving with slaves. No. That was on the triangle, or the part of the triangle between Africa and America, for example. So it was kept from the gaze of the public. All they found was that they were sending ships out with their goods, and they were bringing ships in with things that they could eat and drink and have fun with. So it was, and it was an inherent part of their whole economy. So slavery was the British economy to a large degree, from what I could see anyway. Look, I'm not an historian. These are just my ramblings in terms of what I've picked up. But the point was this: the people did not know what was going on. They were kept in the dark by the mainstream media of the time. And Hannah More and William Wilberforce blew it, right? They got the truth out.
You know what that is? That's a meme.
Absolutely.
A slave ship meme.
Now, you might say, okay, and people who are watching this might say, oh, well, what is this clown talking about, a slave ship, and what's the relevance to today? Here's relevance. Now I'm going to tie this together. We were talking about the how. We talked a little bit about Goliath, and we talked about Hannah More and William Wilberforce and what they did, and how they used that meme of the slave ship. This is what I believe we need. We need a smooth stone swung around a good few times to refine the concept, and we let this thing go straight between the eyes of Goliath. And so our weapon of choice, I believe, are our values. We're not going out there with guns and violence and hatred. That's not who we are. No, it's our values. So I believe, and this is the challenge, and this is what I hope to get out of some of the folk who comment and so on. I've got some ideas on a single, at the moment I can't get it smaller than 2 sheets of paper, right? But what we need is the equivalent of the slave ship picture, but split into what we stand for in terms of our values and what we will not tolerate ever. There's a statement: distinction leads to transformation. Came from a chap named Michael Wallachek, who happened to be one of the people whose courses I attended in South Africa, courtesy of South African Airways. Thank you very much.
Say his name again.
Michael Wallachek.
Okay.
Wallachek. He's from Sweden, I think, and he's still around, and I think you can find him on the internet.
Okay.
But he came up with that statement: distinction leads to transformation. In other words, show the difference, the clear difference between two things, and then people are forced to take a decision, one way or the other. Once they've seen that, they can burn it, they can throw it away, they can do whatever, but they've taken a decision.
Yes.
They've taken the decision to reject the values we stand for. People who believe it will look at it and say, that makes sense.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, it's a very, very powerful stone, okay? Very, very powerful. And all it needs to be is very, very simply putting across what we stand for, and the thoughts that have gone through my mind are freedom. Sorry, let me take one step back, just before I explain where this comes from, because this links back to the Trump train, right?
Okay.
And train analogy. And this is another picture I think that we really do need. It's already there. The Trump train is there. That brilliant video going, all people all over the world that you use.
No, I love that one.
I love it too. I love it. When I saw that, I thought, yes. But it doesn't show the alternative. You with me? So what I'm suggesting is we can take that meme and we can transform it into something more powerful than it already is by showing the contrast. Now, as I say, this predates the Trump train by many, many years. It goes back maybe 25, 30 years. Somebody came, and if whoever it is, I'm not trying to plagiarize or anything like that, but somebody made the statement, and I wasn't able to find it on the internet who actually came up with this, but they said the following: what good is a powerful locomotive spinning its wheels in the mud? What good is a powerful locomotive spinning its wheels in the mud? So we've got a picture in our minds of a train hurtling down rails, unleashing its potential, right? And that's what happens when you've got rails. And what are those rails? Our values.
Gotcha.
Right? So that's the link. That's the link that I've been throwing around in my mind anyway.
I love that.
So we've got a train, powerful locomotive. It can do amazing things for many, many years. And it unleashes the potential of that. Okay, it happens to be an engineering example, but it's a good one.
Yes.
And the rails and the sleepers have, the cross members have particular significance. We can use things like that. And the sorts of things that came to mind are, the rails could be freedom and caring. Because it's no good having freedom of expression, for example, and not caring.
Right.
Freedom of expression, I can say anything I like, and I don't care about you, then I become a total bully and a narcissist, and it leads to all sorts of horrible things. So you can't have freedom without caring, and you also can't have freedom without individual and personal responsibility.
That's true.
So one of the thoughts that came to mind was that one rail could be freedom, another rail could be caring, and the sleepers could be individual responsibility. Every day you take responsibility for that freedom and to care for others, care for and I'm not trying to say we need a welfare society. Right. No, I'm not saying that at all.
But a civilized society, like you're saying, where people care for one another, where there's safety because people care for one another. There's freedom because people care for one another.
Yep, that's it. And all built on a solid foundation of strong nation states, secure borders, and one law for everybody.
For everybody. Well, that goes back to the Magna Carta.
Yeah. And so that's kind of the one page or half of the page, but it's actually very hard to get all of what I'm going to say onto one page because that's what we stand for. And as I'm not trying to be prescriptive, these are just some ideas.
Right.
And this is where I would appreciate criticism and inputs, that we can come up with something that we truly share all across the world, because this cuts across race, it cuts across religion, it cuts across where you're from, what party whether you're Democratic or Republican or whatever party, doesn't matter. You're either for this or you're against it. And you're an enemy of civilization if you're against these things that we eventually come up with as being the smooth stone that we're going to. So that's the picture of perhaps, I'm just giving examples of what I think our values could be.
Okay. Tell
On
me
the
who,
other side,
real quick, tell me who Goliath is. Is Goliath, in your mind, those
it's the
against
force.
civilization, the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
fourth?
yeah. It's the forces of evil.
Okay.
The forces of
Okay.
evil, the darkness. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay.
yep, yep. And and by the way, just while we're on the topic of darkness and light, the stone could also be seen as light because light overcomes darkness, not the other way around. And that is why it's so powerful. Because darkness actually doesn't exist. It's the most bizarre thing. But if you're talking about the physical properties of darkness, now we all know darkness is real to us, right?
Right.
As is evil.
Right.
Evil is very real to us, and so is darkness. When there's no light and it's nighttime, it's dark. But which one overcomes which? Darkness doesn't overcome light. It's light always that overcomes darkness. You can't buy a darkness bulb at the supermarket. Doesn't work.
That's true.
You can't switch on darkness.
Yeah. No, it's just the
But it's very
it's just
real.
the absence of light. Darkness is simply the absence of light.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that is why the stone or the light that we're talking about is so powerful. Because when you switch it on, it hits the target. Okay.
Well, it definitely
And
exposes the target.
Yeah, and that is why there's such a reaction, I believe, to Trump. Because when you switch on the lights in the basement and there are rats there, they scurry in all directions.
Yes.
And yeah, so that I think is what is happening. Is there is such a reaction because when you turn the light on, it shines all over the show.
Yes.
And it upsets the darkness, right?
Right.
So, okay. Now, the other side. So, getting back to the distinction leads to transformation, we've touched on what we believe are our values for civilized society, wherever you might be in the world. And now, what is on the other side? So now you've got the alternative of a locomotive spinning its wheels in the mud. And the terminology that was effectively used by Donald Trump was the swamp. And it's how appropriate. So it all links together. But it's interesting that this particular analogy started 25 years ago. I remember it from about 25 years ago. But it absolutely links into what is going on and what is being said in the States as well. So it's a very useful meme that people are already familiar with. And we just need to put this together on one page that for once and for all we can all say, okay, am I for civilization or am I not? This is what I stand for and this is what I stand against. Now, what I believe should be standing against are things like corruption, political correctness, lies, cruelty, bullying, control, manipulation, all those things.
Right.
And okay, that's too complex, right? So this is the challenge: is how do we? What exactly is it? What are the main things that we're against? It's probably things like corruption, political correctness, and cruelty, barbarism, that sort of thing. So that's the mud. Those aren't values. And tolerance. This is just my view. Tolerance is a lousy value. And I think you made a tweet, or you passed a tweet on this just yesterday, if I recall correctly. You made a comment on tolerance.
Yeah, tolerance is a two-way street.
That's it.
That was a Roger Ailes quote that I put out because he had just passed. So anyway, it was a quote from Roger Ailes.
Okay. Now, all I'm saying in this particular context, I wasn't 100% sure the context that you were referring to there, but tolerance is a lousy value because should we be tolerant of political correctness, cruelty to animals, cruelty to people, barbarism, slavery? I'm not prepared to do that.
Right.
I will not be tolerant of that ever. And as civilization, I don't know how we can have civilized society if our key value is tolerance.
Right.
It makes no sense at all.
Completely agree there.
Care, yes. I'd far rather have somebody who cares about me than tolerates me anyway.
I think the people that do care about me tolerate me.
Yeah, it will be. So yeah, I wanted to mention that the issue of tolerance, because that is often thrown about as, oh, we should be a tolerant society, and what a wonderful thing this will be if we all tolerate. No, that's leading to our destruction.
Yes.
Cannot tolerate all these things that I've just mentioned. So the swamp contains those things that we will not be tolerant of.
Right. Stand
And
against.
our values are what we stand for, and that is freedom of speech, freedom of movement, freedom of association, those things, the caring, individual responsibility, and so on. So those are my thoughts on linking that analogy to a one-pager, which then becomes the stone that we let loose once we're all happy with it. So, I say, I'm not being prescriptive. I cannot be prescriptive. It would be stupid to be prescriptive on a thing like this. You can't. All I'm doing is throwing this up into there and saying, let's be open about what we're trying to do. We're trying to take on Goliath here, and we are going to. We will. And here's our weapon. And it's all out in the open, folks. This is it. But we're first going to talk about it, and we're going to discuss it and come up with something simple that everybody can understand.
Right.
It's simple, easy to understand. Yeah, and it creates a basis for us to work together across the world. It really gives rails to the Trump train.
Yes. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I think you are onto something. I think I would love to hear what other people have to say in the comment sections or however they want to join the conversation on this. There are lots of people that are laying out the fight here. Civilization versus those that are not, that are against it, nationalism versus globalism, good versus evil, dark versus light. There's a lot of ways to lay out this fight that we're in, but I think they're all basically trying to say the same thing. Either freedom will prevail or we're all slaves.
That's it. And it's serious. And yeah, as we discussed, these are very, very serious matters. And of course, the mainstream media want us to think that it's all about soap operas and games and so on. And it's not. Yeah, by all means, let's have fun. Let's enjoy ourselves as well wherever we can. But at the same time, let's not lose sight of the main thing, the gorilla in the room. Yeah.
Right.
And that is what we've just been talking about. So those are some of the thoughts that I've had that I wanted to share, and thank you so much for the opportunity to do that. I don't know if you have any other questions, but I've pretty much covered some of the basics, and I've been waffling on for a long time.
No, but my wheels are turning. You've definitely thrown out some great food for thought. So I would love to, start digesting this, thinking about it, and making it, like you said, one pager at a glance is another way to look at it. Something where somebody can see it quickly and grasp the idea that you're trying to convey of what we're standing for, what we're standing against, who's with us. Who's with us? What do you
Absolutely.
What do you want? What do you want as a sovereign nation state, as part of Western civilization, as a member of the world? What do we all want?
Yeah. Because there are people from Zimbabwe to Singapore to Japan all over the show who basically, I believe, would support what we are proposing here. This is it is largely it cuts across most barriers. I won't say all. I think you know where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
But it cuts across most barriers, and you're either for that, or you can't be half pregnant. Either for civilization or you're against it, and it links back to that leadership story about the half revolution, because you either have a half revolution or you don't. You either have a full revolution or you don't. And what we've seen throughout history is revolution after flaming revolution, and every one a failure. What we need are half revolutions. That's what I believe anyway. And I think that it links, and those are the sorts of leaders that we need to make civilization work.
I think that's right on the money. And I did hear a quote recently about leadership. Leaders don't create followers; they create other leaders.
Absolutely. I think you've absolutely nailed it there. That's a wonderful thing. In fact, we are on the same track. I wanted to mention this, that it slipped my mind. But the true measure of a leader are the leaders that follow. It links directly to that quote. So, when assessing the so-called great leaders of the world, that's a very, very interesting test.
It is an interesting
Very
test.
interesting test.
Absolutely. Well, I think Donald Trump is a leader. I think he's a visionary, like you said, visionary. He's a leader. He's somebody that develops the people around him, encourages the people around him, motivates the people around him.
Yes.
He's been fascinating to watch.
Yes.
He was an interesting individual before we plunked him into the White House, and now he's double interesting. I just can't take my eyes off of what's happening. It's the most fascinating time to be alive and to watch what's happening. And now he's on his first trip abroad, and so we'll see the wake he leaves as he travels around the continent, but around the world. But anyway, I love these thoughts that you've laid out. I've enjoyed so much listening to your thoughts and your explanations and your analogies. They're just fabulous. So my mind is swirling. I'm thinking about these things. I know our listeners will be thinking about them too, and we will invite them to carry on the conversation in the comment section below the video, and I will put your Twitter link there too if people want to contact you that way. So for now, we will put a comma here. Is there anything else you would like to say before we leave?
Yeah, I would. One last thing. Firstly, thanks so much for providing this platform. I really think that what you've kicked off, because it's thanks to you that this has happened. It's this forum that you've provided. Thank you so much. But what I wanted to end off with was my English teacher. I had an English teacher at a place called Germiston High. Her name was D-O, short for Doris Day. Day. She was an amazing woman. She was always very positive. I actually hated English. I really didn't enjoy it. But something struck a chord. She at that stage must have been about 65. But she was an amazing woman. She's always very positive. When I left school, I didn't see her for 30 years. I saw her just before leaving South Africa. She was 95.
Wow.
And I looked at her and I said, "You've always had such a positive attitude. What is your value system?" And she said the following. She hesitated for a couple of seconds, and then she looked me straight in the eye and she said, "Trust in God and fight for what is right." Trust in God and fight for what is right. And what a wonderful thing for an old lady of 95 to suggest.
Absolutely.
Isn't that what we should be doing right now, right here?
Absolutely. Because we can't fight the fight without him. He's the one with David that guided that stone.
Absolutely.
Right where it needed to be. And that stone was smooth. He didn't pick up any old rock. He used his head.
Yep.
He knew what would fly true, but it was God who guided it to where it needed to go.
Correct.
So,
Cari, thank you so much.
Peter, thank you. This has been a delight, and I'm so happy that you spent some time with me today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.